Here's the agenda for Thursday, September 10th. Again, today we are working on that cold case research project. Today we're going to start by going over the difference between primary and secondary sources. In the cold case presentation, the direction slides, we'll look at slides 13 through 17 to learn about differences between primary and secondary sources. Students who are present in class or live on Zoom will do a quizzes game live to review primary sources. If you are reviewing this later from home, and watching the screencast, then you should click this link and play the quizzes on your own. If you do this on your own, not with the class, then I would like you to please take a screenshot of your score and email that to me to show me that you completed it. And then we are going to review how to take notes using that cold case task guide and how to evaluate the sources you're finding to determine whether the information is good, trustworthy information or not. Once we've gone over that lesson together, there's a lot of time for research. So remember, you are working with one partner. Between the two of you, you need a total of, or a minimum of 4 sources. There is room for up to 6, 3 sources each in your research document. At least one of those has to be a primary source or a first-hand account. So let's take a look at the difference between primary and secondary sources. A primary source is a first-hand account that was created by people who took part in or witnessed an event. Primary sources are more accurate than secondary sources because they were created by people who are there, but they can be more difficult to find, especially for something where we're going far back into history or maybe something where there weren't any survivors, like the lost colony of Roanoke. A secondary source is created by people who weren't actually present at the event. It offers an interpretation or an analysis of the event. So it's someone reflecting on something that happened, but they didn't experience it themselves. They're looking at evidence they've found and they're analyzing it. Secondary sources tend to be less accurate, but they're often presented as facts. So let's look at some examples. A letter that was written by someone about an event they experienced would be a primary source. The same is true of a diary. A textbook, however, would be a secondary source because it's written by historians who are experts on that topic, but they didn't live through it. They're looking back at events that happened in the past. What do you think about an autobiography? Auto means self, so this is a story someone writes about themselves. If you guessed primary source, you're right. How about an encyclopedia? If you guess secondary, you're right. An encyclopedia is like a textbook. It's written by people who did not live through the event. They're looking at sources and analyzing it after the fact. A photograph would be a primary source because it's taken at the time of the event by someone who's experiencing it. Same with a birth certificate. That's a primary source. A biography is secondary because it's written by one person about another. Artifacts are objects, so something like a piece of pottery or an old rotary telephone. Those are primary sources because they were created during that time. A transcript of a speech or a video recording of someone's speech, that would also be a primary source. A third-person article, though, when it's written by someone who didn't experience the event, would be a secondary source. So here's an example of a primary source. We have a few pictures here that are all taken of the same place, the same event. Any guesses at what this might be? Look for clues. There's water. There are ships here in the water. This looks like maybe an island or a peninsula. Mountains in the background. It's black and white, so that gives you some information about the time period when this photograph was taken. You know that it's not current. Look at the writing at the bottom. It's in Japanese. If you guess that this is a picture taken of Pearl Harbor at the start of World War II, you're correct. There's a lot we can learn about Pearl Harbor from this picture. We can see where the ships were located. Here it looks like a bomb has been dropped. There's water spraying. If you look really closely, you can see some airplanes here flying overhead. So this gives us information about where things were located. And judging by the amount of damage in this picture, this is early on in the bombing of Pearl Harbor. Look at the next one. Here's an explosion. Again, same event, Pearl Harbor, but from a different perspective. The last one was taken from the air. This one's taken from land. Here's another primary source. This is a newspaper headline, 1,500 dead in Hawaii, Congress votes war. This is a primary source because it was written at the time that the event occurred. Look at the date. Monday, December 8th, 1941. This was published the day after the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor. So these are all first-hand accounts. They're things that were created at the time that Pearl Harbor was bombed by the Japanese. And so these would count as primary sources for your research project. Now pause and play that quizzes game that was in the other presentation. Here it is. Click on this link to play the quizzes game on your own to practice primary and secondary sources, and then resume the video and we'll quickly go over note-taking using the task guide. All right, let's talk about taking notes. Why do you think it's necessary to take notes? Do you think of things like recording accurate information because you won't remember it all? Looking at multiple sources? Taking notes helps us to absorb information. When you take it in multiple ways, you read it and you write it, you're using more parts of your brain, so it helps your brain to process the information and hold on to it longer. Taking notes allows us to review information. We can check back later and recall facts. You can compare what you're finding in a new source with something you saw in one you previously looked at. It helps you to keep track of everything. You will look at so many different websites just to complete this small project. So taking notes helps you to keep track of the sources you used, the quotes that you want to include in your project, helps you remember where you read something so you can go back and look at it and clarify it. In this project, you're going to practice taking notes, and there are some things that you are expected to do. You're looking for clues. Write down the things that give you clues to help solve your mystery and that help you with the key pieces of information you want to remember that people need to know about your topic. Write down information that answers your research questions. If it doesn't help answer your research questions, then it's probably not relevant. So you're looking for information like who was involved, what happened, where did it take place, when did it happen, why did they do that, why did this happen, what did it lead to next, and how. Think about what we know about the author of that source as you are evaluating whether it's something that you want to include in your research. Is that person trustworthy? What does this tell us about the main topic? Does the information on the current source help me to understand the mystery that I'm trying to research? Does it give me a clue to solve it? Now, this is really important. When you are taking notes, you're looking at websites and you're recording information in a digital document, do not copy and paste. When you're writing notes onto your cold case task guide, put them in your own words. The only time you can copy and paste is if you put quotation marks around it and you cite your source. You give the name of the person who wrote that. So that means that you'll do it maybe once per source. The rest of the time, you need to summarize or restate things in your own words. It's important to do that when you're doing your research so that you don't accidentally plagiarize when you're building your final project. And trust me, your teachers can pretty easily pick out whether that sentence is in your own words or not. As you're taking notes, it's important to think about the reliability of your sources. You need to make sure that you're getting information from places you can trust. Some sources are considered reliable because they've been written by people who are experts in the field. Unreliable sources, on the other hand, are things like Wikipedia, where anyone can post to it. They might not necessarily have a thorough knowledge or full understanding of a topic. They might be trying to convince you of something due to their bias. Remember, anyone can post information on the internet, so we need to be critical readers in order to determine what to believe. And when you're trying to determine if something's reliable or not, think about these 5 things: validity, time, content, purpose, and accuracy. When you're thinking about validity, think about the author. Is this person trustworthy? Are they really experts on this topic? Do I have contact information for them? Is there a link provided to their homepage? What is the domain? Is it .com or .net? Is it .edu? That's more trustworthy. Some sites are are trying to convince you of something, and that means that they're less trustworthy. For example, other countries have codes that tell us the country the information is coming from. Something coming out of Cuba is maybe less reliable than something that was written by the US government about a military conflict like World War II. Look at the time. When was the site last updated? Is this a site that's frequently revised and improved? Is it something that's been around a long time? If it is, that's something that tells us it's probably more trustworthy because it hasn't been taken down, but it should be revised often or improved or added to. Think about the content. If there's too much information, it's probably going to be too much for you to break down. If there's too little, it's not really going to give you the information that you need, and it's not a source worth spending a lot of time on. Notice if it gives you links to other useful and reliable sites that are on the same topic. That's a clue that it's a source worth using. Purpose. Is this site trying to persuade you? Is it trying to educate you? Is it trying to sell you something? Think through why this thing was created. A .edu site generally exists for the sake of education, so it's going to be a more trustworthy site that's not trying to sell you something. Watch for bias. Is there a specific viewpoint that's being promoted here? Even nonprofit.org sites can be biased. And then accuracy. How can you ensure that the information is precise, authoritative, and current? Check for sources. The author of the website should give the sources, the websites, the books, those sorts of things that they use to come up with their information. If they're not citing any sources, then it might not be a trustworthy site to use. So, for today, the first thing that you need to do is sit with your partner and choose the topic you're going to research. Then divide up the work. What will each of you focus on? Today, you're going to start your research and look for sources to use. Each of you needs to complete research from at least 2 different sources over the next 2 days. That will give you a total of 4 sources. In your own cold case task guide, there are tables for 3 sources, so you can each use up to 3. And if you need even more, then you can copy and paste that blank table and keep adding to it. The minimum is 2 sources per person, 4 sources per pair. Make sure that you record every single source you use in the task guide. Don't think that you'll be able to go back through your search history and easily find what you used. You're looking at way too many things to do that. Try to come up with a different research question for each part of the table, each section of your cold case task guide. So think of something that you need to learn more about, then find a source that answers that question. Then come up with a new question and find a new source. Make sure that you're checking in with your partner along the way so that you're not doubling up on things and that you're still headed in the same direction. So today is a work day where you're working on research. Keep communicating with your partner along the way. Let's look at that cold case task guide really quickly so you know what to record and where to do it. So here's the cold case task guide that you are working on. This is assigned to you in Schoology. On day 1, you should have chosen your mystery. If you haven't yet, do that first. Highlight the one that you've chosen, or if you have a different topic that was approved by your teacher, you can write that in. Then turn it into a question. What's the question that your overall project is going to answer? And today you'll work on research. So you came up with some theories that you need to look into. Choose one of them and start your research now. Take notes using this document. So you'll type your research question at the top, then find a website that gives you more information or potentially answers that question. So it might be something like, why do some people think that the lost colony of Roanoke didn't actually disappear, that the colonists joined American Indian tribes? Then you're going to look for a source that answers that question. So here you'll write the title of the source, then describe what type of source it is. Is it an online encyclopedia? Is it a research paper? Is it an interview? Here, this section, notes from the source, they're going to list information in numbered or bulleted points. Write down all of the evidence this source gives you. So this part of the table right here is actually going to end up being the biggest. Write 3 to 5 facts that you get from your source in this section. If you need to write more, that's great. And remember, this is the place where you don't copy and paste. You summarize, you put things in your own words. Then analyze what you came up with from that source. So who made it? Was it a professor? Was it a historian? Was it an archaeologist? When did they make it? Try to find the date for that evidence. If it's a photograph, try to find the person who took the picture and the date the picture was taken. Then contextualizing. Why was this made? Are they writing to persuade you of something? Are they writing to explain evidence they found? Is it a photograph that was taken to show what happened, like the Pearl Harbor photos that we looked at? Corroborating. Is there anything that you find on other websites that supports what you found on this one? Or is there a big difference? Maybe one website gives a different date than another for the event that occurred. So write that here. And then what questions do you have now? As a result of what you learned here, what are you going to look into next? That goes in the further investigation square. When you've completed that, then you're going to move on to a new source. So choose a different question to research, find a different source to use, and complete the next table. Again, if you need more than the 3 that are provided, you can copy and paste more of the blank table in this document. You do not have to finish all of these today. You should finish at least one. Please, please, please keep track of any website or any source that you take information from. Those all need to be cited in your final project. Ask your teacher if you have questions. Good luck.